friend, for organising this important and timely debate. He very nearly put me off my breakfast this morning as I woke up to his dulcet tones on Radio 4. But he made some very, very important points, particularly about the manifesto commitment in the Conservative Party manifesto for higher density housing, for mews houses, for mansion blocks and the like. And I would like to join with him in emphasising the importance of this, because I thought his speech rather neatly summarised the slightly schizophrenic approach which we have in this country. It doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, doesn't matter which part of the country you're in, to taller buildings, if I can put it that way. If you mention high-rise living, people automatically picture some sort of brutalist 1960s tower block, and their hackles start to rise. They get concerned about the quality of the build, they get concerned about the design of the build, and they get very concerned about not only the impact on the people who are living in that particular development, but also on the public realm which it influences around it, because of course everyone can see it for a good deal of distance around. But mention mansion blocks, mention terrace streets, mention mews houses, altogether on a more human scale, things which are 4, 5, 6 stories tall, the sorts of things which you will see in many long-established city centres, both in London, but also in Bath, in Bristol, in many of the prosperous Victorian cities of the Midlands and the North. And they take a very different approach indeed. They are much more welcoming because those designs have stood the test of time. And I thought his comments about trying to make sure that you get local buy-in is particularly important. You may have vernacular style, you may have a local style, often using local materials as well, but it can be at a very, very high modern building technique and a very modern building standard, which allows you to deliver some of the other points which have been made by other colleagues already in interventions about having greener buildings which are far more energy efficient and so on at the same time.
Would my honourable friend kindly give way?
I'm happy to give way.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And he's making a very good point about higher density, but would it not be right that green spaces must be included, if not in these properties, i.e. everyone doesn't need to have a garden, they must have some green space nearby, because RHS surveys have indicated that there's a direct link between our health and well-being, Mr Chairman, and green space.
Eccleston Square.
My honourable friend and near neighbour in Somerset makes a tremendously important point, because the advantage of building up, not out, if I can sort of paraphrase the manifesto commitment for higher density living, is precisely that you manage to preserve, and in some cases enhance, available green space. Because by taking existing urban centres, they may not be city centres, it can be market towns, it can be seaside towns like Weston-super-Mare, which I represent. If you take those kinds of city and town centres and increase the density by working within the existing street plan, within the existing plots, but by saying many of our town centres are 2 stories tall on average, maybe 3. If you walk down most main streets in most towns and you look up, you will see large amounts of fresh air, which is economically incredibly potentially valuable if only it is properly developed, and providing it is developed in a modern style, not necessarily a modernist style, but with modern materials and in keeping with the local style, so that many of the problems which have just been mentioned by my immediately preceding speaker, the lady from the Labour Party, about value engineering and the difficulty of making sure that economic value is achieved, go away. Because if you have an existing plot and you can put an extra couple of stories on it to take it from 2 stories to 4 or 5, you are by no means tripping over the problems which my honourable friend was talking about high-rise living. People will accept that. You've only got to walk through town centres like the ones right near where we are standing and having this debate now to see that people will accept that. It is extraordinary, Sir David, to consider that parts of Kensington and Chelsea and other parts of Westminster, right near where we are currently debating this issue, are some of the highest density housing developments in the entire country. And they are hardly bywords for inner city and urban decay. They are good examples of designs and systems of living which have stood the test of time. And so, Sir David, I want to make a plea, sing a hymn of praise, if I can, for building up, not out, because it attracts new investment into our existing towns and city centres. It helps with urban regeneration as a result. It also reduces urban sprawl, helping you preserve green spaces, because if you increase the amount of density in existing urban spaces, you don't have to build out onto the fringes and eat into green belts and the like. It also breaks the stranglehold, and we've heard about this from my right honourable friend from Basingstoke, the stranglehold of the established housing developers, because they often are not so keen on building small plots in the centre of towns. Small local developers and small local builders are much more keen to do so, and it is greener because it cuts commuting times, because people can live closer to work, and it allows you to build in an energy-efficient fashion. And so, Sir David, my query to the Minister is this: how can we get this manifesto commitment to build up, not out, to increase urban density, to move much, much faster? He will already be aware, I'm sure, that I made a submission after the White Paper for permitted development to allow people to build up, not out. And I hope that he will take that very, very seriously. And I would also ask him to consider whether or not we can increase the level of credit which local authorities in their local plans get for local development orders to allow people to build up in the middle of towns, because if the housing inspectors, when considering whether or not those local plans are acceptable, will give credit for the extra building which might happen, which they do not currently accept as part of that, the assessment of local housing need, whether or not that will provide the necessary local incentives to local communities to want to have people to build beauty in their backyard.